hell was that? I tell you what, I'd rather be painting right now. I'd rather be painting right now. You know, we're going to kick off today's Godless sermon with a new hymn that's going to kind of bring down the tone a little bit, because right now, I don't know if you are aware, but things are getting a little heated in America and frankly all over the world. And I think it's a little bit overblown. It's over dramatized, and we don't need it. So we need to take a step back and have a serious conversation about whether or not any of us are acting like the parents of our inner children that we should be. Are we really, is this really what it's come down to? Is this really who we are? And I don't think that we need to get to a place where everybody's at each other's throats like this. It's still unnecessary. And that's what today's Godless sermon will be about. For now, I introduce to you for the first time the wisdom of our exemplar Korihor, godless wise man that he was and wasn't. He is a fictional character from the Book of Mormon. But he was wise in the story. And he taught us that a child is not guilty.
Child is not guilty for laughing too loud, making mistakes, or chasing a cloud. Let children speak. Listen, you will find their laughter wonder, potential undefined. Let them run, let them laugh and grow. Sing the song that only their hearts know. A child is not guilty, born to be free. Don't blame them because of you or me. Let them dance, let them shout, they illuminate the way. A child is not guilty, give them room to play. Korihor's wisdom, we're born of the sky. The children in us look up to ask why. Remember innocence, you will see their joyful voices echo in you and me. Let them run wild like the river's course, free of gods, of sin, of our remorse. A child is not guilty, born to be free. Don't blame them because of you or me. Let them dance, let them shout, they illuminate the way. A child is not guilty, give them room to play. We are all born immature, flawed in each other's minds. We all judge and are judged all of our childish lives. Let this voice speak, all judgments melt. The wondrous child within yourself. A child is not guilty, born to be free. Don't blame them because of you or me. give them room to play.
Knew him. Don't look at my messy office. Don't look at that. So, we're going to talk about it. You know, Mark Twain once said, I thoroughly disapprove of duels. If a man were to challenge me, I would take him kindly and forgivingly by the hand, lead him to a quiet place, and kill him. Now, perhaps that's an insensitive thing to bring up right now, but something has to be said, because some people are losing their jobs over posts that they have made on their personal social media accounts about what happened in Utah this past week. There's a man on TikTok right now. It's 10:10 here in Utah. And a man has been organizing in Tennessee for the last, I guess that would be last 10 minutes, apparently trying to get a whole bunch of people together in mid-Tennessee, mid to west Tennessee, I think he was calling it, at the Harbor Freight. And he had to post, he posted that, and we're going to meet in the parking lot of Harbor Freight. Which, yeah, no comment. No, leaving that one alone. Anyway, until apparently somebody at Harbor Freight contacted him to say, you're not going to bring that shit here. Go meet somewhere else. Go have your little posse gathering somewhere else. Don't be bringing that shit to our parking lot. So he had to post again just a couple days ago about how we're getting everybody together to do training and maybe get ice cream, he says, and maybe go get some lunch. And then I'm going to talk to you. Okay. It sounds a little bit, not going to say what it is. Not going to say what it is. Let's just put it out there. Let it float. Let it float. It sounds a little bit like something you don't. Yeah. I've been gathering clips of people talking, and I'm not going to air them because, frankly, it's not worth getting the Church of Korihor's account shut down over the extremely violent and, frankly, racially driven comments being made on TikTok and YouTube and X right now. I'm not going to repeat all of it, but suffice it to say, these videos that have thousands of comments on them, so surely tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, probably maybe even millions of views. This guy's apparently organizing a posse of some kind that's supposed to be meeting in the last 10 minutes, maybe to eat ice cream and talk about how much they miss Charlie Kirk, but maybe for something else. And this seems to me like it's gotten out of hand when people are talking about organizing to respond. That's one guy. I came across this video of a man with his shirt off, obviously, of course, and showing off his tattoos, including his throat tattoo, of course. And talking about how you liberals don't know what you've blah, 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 blah. I won't repeat it. Almost every single one, almost every single video I'm seeing either mentions trans people, even though there's no connection that I can see worthy of the mention between trans people and what happened to Charlie Kirk. They're mentioning race. They're mentioning the George Floyd riots. And protests, etc. They're not mentioning the Democratic lawmakers who lost their lives in the No Kings rallies. They're not mentioning how here in Salt Lake City, here in Utah, just a few miles north of what happened to Charlie Kirk, an innocent bystander lost their life just standing there, not even participating in anything, because somebody got trigger happy at the rally. Nobody's going to mention that. Well, I mean, nobody who's organizing, trying to organize at Harbor Freight, only to find out Harbor Freight's like, no, you're not going to do that here. So the guy tried to switch it to a park until the police contacted him and said, you're not going to do that on public property. You're not going to do that there. That's an official gathering place. You have to have a permit, and you don't have one. You're not going to get one, apparently. I don't know. I don't know the intimate details. I just know what this guy posted on TikTok, because he had to keep posting. We're going to meet here. We're going to meet here. He kept changing it. It's like, we're just going to meet on the street, because apparently we're allowed to just meet on the street because streets are public. Well, you might be in for a bit of a surprise to find out you get a large enough group. No, they can disband you. You know, you're allowed to protest in America. They say you are. But generally on a city street, you're going to have a preordained, pre-signed, pre-approved permit peaceably to assemble. Doesn't appear that these people are doing much of that, but maybe that's because they don't intend peaceably to assemble. And that's what I want to tell you about here. Okay. Is this what it's come down to? Is this what we are doing to be satisfied and to get satisfaction? You know, there's a theme, a meme, a motif, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah. In Regency era movies and novels, you've seen it before. When a man challenges another man to a duel, he slaps him with a glove, usually, and then demands satisfaction. I demand satisfaction, sir. Say what you will about duels. And Mark Twain apparently had an opinion. But they were a way for two rich brats to decide a matter between themselves rather than raising armies and going to war. It was a way for everybody to decide, no. You two rich, spoiled kids have beef with each other. You get up early at dawn. You go out into the woods. You settle it between the two of you. Whichever one comes out of that conflict, we'll go, well, that's how that ended. And then it's over. You have beef, take it out with each other. Don't drag everybody else into this. And frankly, while I also thoroughly disapprove of duels, I wish more of our arguments were to happen that way. You know? Yes, it's fun to have a debate. It's nice to be able to air our grievances publicly. But I personally think that you should be allowed to air your grievances, but and you should say what you want, and publicly if you want. But one, you must do it like a Regency era gentleman. Yes, ladies and persons non-binary the same. First, you must do it with glove in hand. And secondly, you must do it in Regency speak. I dare you, sir. And thirdly, you have to keep it between yourselves. Don't drag everybody else into it. You have beef with somebody for saying something or doing something, you take it up with them. Fight it out. And everybody else, let's just make this agreement. That's between them. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. This is between these two spoiled kids. Let them fight. Let them have their beef. And let them air their grievances. Supposedly, that's what Charlie Kirk was all about. Free speech. And yet, I am now seeing posts from people, I've even responded to a few here on YouTube, where people have said that you should be rounded up if your feelings about what happened with Charlie Kirk are anything but remorseful. You should be rounded up and deported. I'm sorry. Is that free speech? It's suddenly free speech to say if you have the wrong opinion or express the wrong opinion about my friend I've never met, and who obviously whose rhetoric I have never actually heard, and who I have never actually read anything he has written, obviously don't know anything about except what he's white, looks like me, believes what I believe. They're posting pictures right now. The Mormons are posting pictures on the internet. Even people that I follow, that I follow in a so-called hate follow. I don't actually hate them. I actually think they're pretty funny guys. But a YouTube account here on YouTube, they posted a picture in the community feed of Charlie Kirk as a Mormon the day after he passed, with Jesus in heaven, dressed all in white. When am I going to see Breonna Taylor dressed all in white because she's a Mormon now? When am I going to see George Floyd dressed up like a Mormon now? It's a little on the nose, you know what I mean? Because it's like, do you see? Do you not see? It doesn't matter whether or not you think you are blowing the dog whistle. If the dogs hear it, it's a dog whistle. And we see what's going on. We see these responses that are happening in our community and people ratcheting up the rhetoric. So I say, look, one, do it with a glove in hand so we all know that you're just airing your grievances. You just feel like you have to express yourself. All right, give them room everybody clear some space. Give these gentlemen room. Give them room to express themselves. Number one, do it with glove in hand. Number two, do it in Regency speak. That'll be fun, right? Like, how dare you say what you said about my dearly departed friend Charles, sir? I demand satisfaction. Pistols at dawn. You, sir, have no idea what Charlie Kirk ever said to offend people in my community. To you, I say, I will get your satisfaction. I will make you answer, sir. And then keep it between yourselves. Is this satisfaction? Let me put to you three things, okay? I'm using this dual analogy because I feel like it's effective. Everybody knows what happened with Alexander Hamilton, right? Or do you know? Alexander Hamilton, very ill-advisedly, a man who very much disapproved of dueling, lost his son in a duel. And then not long after, and found himself with his family just destroyed over this. And eventually found himself in a duel himself with the Vice President of the United States. What? Aaron Burr. And he went to it. He didn't like duels. He hated it. He hated dueling. He thought it was a bad thing. And he died in one. He had nothing left after his son was gone. This is the thing about duels. Yes, it was a way of keeping it between two people. And you would say, one of the lines, my preferred line is, you will answer for that remark. I think that's especially cool. That's a great way of saying it. I'm going to make you answer for that. You're going to make statements like that. Put your blood on the line. I think that's cool for storytelling's sake. But really, nobody should have to raise the stakes to that level to have a civil conversation. When it gets to that place, don't call it a civil conversation. It's not anymore. That is the point at which civil conversation is over. When you start threatening each other's livelihood, you should be fired. Somebody should contact their employer. Now they're accumulating lists. I posted on TikTok on Thursday saying, let's give a little bit of room. Was it Thursday? No, Friday. after the arrest was made of this young man who apparently is the one who did this crime here in Utah. And I said, first of all, the information they've given us so far, it's not enough. And Utah's law enforcement agencies, I think we know them well enough to know, until there is more to go on, don't just take it the way they say it, because we don't know the whole story. And I still maintain that. And maybe that's not just law enforcement here in Utah. Maybe that's law enforcement everywhere. But right now in Utah, it's particularly poignant. I will remind you, as I did in that post, maybe I shouldn't, but they've had Celeste Boris's, isn't it Celeste Boris, skirt with frickin' Tim Ballard's semen on it, confirmed, DNA confirmed, for over a year. And at first, they told the media, no, there's no complaint. And even though they're not supposed to be allowed to do that, according to Utah law. Then they had to come out and say, law enforcement, they had to come out and say, oh, yeah, no, it happened. Yeah, no, oh, yeah, there's a case. But we don't know where it is. And then they had to come back and say, okay, yeah, okay, we shouldn't have said that we don't know where it is. What we mean is we're not making comment on it, even though they are obligated to under the law. And I said, look, give this kid some grace. Give this kid some room. They may have the wrong guy. They may have just picked somebody who looked like him. That's not uncommon. That wouldn't be unheard of. It wouldn't be the first time. Apparently now we know that this young person apparently confessed to someone, his father or someone. But I said at that time, on Friday, you mark my words, it will not be long before they try to pin this young man's actions on trans people. And look where we are. Because if the New York Post is going to make a comment about it, or if Elon Musk is going to tweet about it, it has to be about their hatred about trans people, or it's not worth their time. And now, because apparently trans people don't feel afraid enough in our country, they have to get blamed for this, regardless of the fact that no trans person was involved, as far as I know. Someone knows something more than I do. Now, apparently, Kash Patel's FBI, there's a source inside Kash Patel's FBI. I would not be the least bit surprised to find A, it's Kash Patel himself. B, it's nobody, and it's just attributed by somebody who claims, I know a guy who knows a guy in the FBI. And they don't care. They just say, oh yeah, a source in the FBI. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's even true. But we can't tell at this point. With the New York Post or somebody or some other news organization saying a source in the FBI. Okay, yeah, means nothing. Frankly, it means nothing so far. Give us better than that or shut up. Says that this young man who did this crime, apparently, allegedly, was living with a trans person in a romantic relationship. Okay. Maybe it's even true. Let's say that it's true, just hypothetically. Because frankly, they get it wrong so often, I really don't care. What difference does it make? What difference does it make? Don't do it no matter who you live with. Don't do it no matter who you love. Don't commit acts of political violence for this reason, if nothing else. It doesn't work. Even if you feel better after it's done, it's not going to change anything. It doesn't get anything accomplished. It just makes people more angry. Nobody who is out there, show of hands, Who out there saw what happened to Charlie Kirk this last week and said, "Oh yeah, no, I officially changed my mind about that man"? Who out there is looking around going, "Well, I didn't know that somebody could lose their life for it. So obviously he was right and the rest of us are wrong. How stupid I feel for having been wrong." As opposed to how many of us just feel more dug in about the position we already held. So what did it get accomplished? A family lost a husband and a father. Is that tragic enough? Yeah. Take it back even simpler than that. Even simpler than that. A human being who might have changed their minds and become an advocate for the completely different position, the complete opposite position that they held, had they had the opportunity, will now never have the opportunity. That's the real crime. That's the real tragedy, is that somebody was robbed of their opportunity to apply some critical thinking, change their mind, and do a complete 180 and do some actual good. A few weeks ago, and I know you guys know I like to refer back to sermons I've done before, I talked about Martin Niemöller, who was a German preacher and a naval commander in Germany in the First World War. And he was supportive of the rise of the Third Reich. He supported it, liked it, preached on behalf of it until it actually got into full swing. Then this thing happened. It was called the Reichstag fire. The Reichstag is the building where the German parliament meets. And it caught fire one day in Germany, in Berlin. And immediately that night, a socialist was caught and apparently either confessed or was made to confess that he set the fire, even though the evidence for it sparse to non-existent, frankly. They just caught a guy. That guy was blamed. The next day, oh, look at how the communists are trying to destroy our beloved Germany. And within a matter of hours, there was an edict that went forth from the president of Germany, who was separate from the chancellor, saying, as of this moment, I give the chancellor, you know who that was, I hope, I give the chancellor full power to do whatever he has to do to bring this under control. Because after they set fire to the Reichstag, it's chaos, it's mayhem. If they can do that, they can do anything that they want. They can create any kind of violence they want, get some law and order in here. He has full authority, full power until the crisis is resolved. On account of that edict from President Hindenburg, that chancellor stayed in power long after his term was supposed to expire and did everything to have happened. Martin Niemöller wasn't until after the Reichstag fire that Martin Niemöller began to realize, oh shit, I backed the wrong horse here. When all of a sudden the government installed this new government office, a government office meant specifically to reinvigorate Christian faith in Germany. And where did they do it from? They did it from Freethinkers Hall. You guys have heard me talk about this. I'm sorry if it gets repetitive. But it was Max Sievers and the German Freethinkers Association, the largest atheist association in the world up until that point, with over 500,000 members, who were the ones to flee And Max Sievers, sorry, I checked to make sure it's not an emergency. And it's not. Oh my goodness. Yeah, not. It was Max Sievers who destroyed the rolls of his own people, of his own organization, the German Freethinkers League, and or relocated them to Belgium and fled to Belgium after he'd been arrested by the Gestapo and had the shit beaten out of him. And so he flees, and from that office, from that place, they begin to crack down on the disease of atheism. And at the same time, in order to coordinate all these efforts, they started to install in the churches spies who were loyal to the Reich. And then Martin Niemöller looked around and said, oh, shit. Did we back the wrong guy here? And then he started to organize his fellow preachers. What were they going to do? Light buildings on fire? No. What were they going to do? Call for an armed uprising against the government? No. What were they going to do? They were going to organize to protest the Reich installing overlords to tell them what their doctrine was, what things they could sermonize about, whether or not they could put crosses or swastikas on the steeples, whether or not they were going to be forced to celebrate, to hold special services to celebrate Hitler's birthday. I'm sorry. This is church, they said. We're supposed to celebrate the dear leader's birthday for him. Happy birthday to him. We'll send him a card. That's not what they said. I'm just making a joke. But it's a very serious thing. And once he was organizing and realized, oh shit, we're going to have to do this, and we're going to have to do it quietly because the government's listening. They're listening to what we're doing all the time. They have little spies. They're infiltrating our organization to try and put little spies. We have to make sure that we only are talking to people that we trust and know. Well, guess what? It didn't take long for that man to find himself in a concentration camp where he spent the rest of the war. And then when he left the concentration camp, when he was liberated by U.S. forces in 1945, you know what he did? They started a church, him and his fellow Christian pastors. This is an atheist guy here saying, wow, I'm impressed. They started a church they called the Confessing Church. Confessing? What are they confessing? Martin Niemöller spent the rest of his life confessing that he and the rest of the Christian church and organizing Christian preachers in Germany, the German church as it was called. This is Lutherans. This is, as far as I know, Lutherans. This is Methodists. This is probably Catholics too. I don't know that much about it. Confessing that they were complicit in the Third Reich because they didn't say anything while the hateful rhetoric was accelerating. It was too late. Hence the famous, it's not often said poem, but it's actually a piece of prose. It doesn't really matter that much. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. That's talking about, yes, the Socialist Party, talking about the Communist Party. It's also talking about Max Sievers, who was a socialist activist, in addition to being the chairman of the German Freethinkers League. It's talking about the atheists, in addition to other socialists. And by and large, the atheists were socialists. He says, first they came for the socialists. And I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists. And I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. And I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. When they came for me, no one was left to speak for me. The man spent the rest of his life having survived the war, having survived the camps, where, by the way, while he was in the camp, volunteered to go and serve in the Navy when they were looking for officers because the tide of the war had turned against them, volunteered to captain boats for the Reich so that he could get out of the concentration camp, because guess what? As much as he was pricked in his conscience, he also just hated being in a concentration camp. I don't mind. I don't blame him. He spent the rest of his life confessing that he was complicit. Now, those words, they place them in Holocaust museums all over the world. There comes a point at which it's too late to say anything. There comes a point where we can look around and we can say, "Oh, I'm pissed about this. You can't talk like this. You can't tell us this or that." And at that point, it's too late. So it makes sense that some people are getting punished, losing their jobs. People are losing their livelihood, and people are being threatened. People's lives are being threatened. I chose not to share with you the recordings that I have, but I'll probably put together a compilation at some point and put it at least on the website so people can see it if they are curious. But I can't put it up here. It's too vitriolic. It's too violent. Of people posting videos of themselves talking about how much violence they're going to bring into the world because of what happened with Charlie Kirk. This has escalated to a point where people feel emboldened to be able to say, well, I guess we can all threaten each other. We can all say whatever we want. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's not okay. Now, it doesn't mean that everything else, that the lionizing of Charlie Kirk is okay either. I don't know how many of you know the name, and let me make sure I get it right. Okay, so there's a woman, a Ukrainian woman named Irina. Irina, I have her name here. I've started to write the names down because I've been getting so bad about remembering people's names. Anyways, blonde girl who was stabbed to death on a train this last couple weeks ago. And right now she's all that some people can talk about on social media. Now, never mind how many people of color have been killed. I'm just going to say some words that are probably being censored. In the meantime, and how many of their names do they know? Right? Who remembers Trayvon Martin? Where was this reaction about Trayvon Martin? Trayvon Martin would be in his 30s now. But suddenly it was a guy who looks like me, a guy who prays at the church I pray, not me, but a guy who says a few things that I agree with, maybe things that I agree with but feel afraid to say, but he's allowed to say it, and who never caused harm to anyone. Excuse me? There are things that Charlie Kirk did that have driven people I know to flee the country, to flee America. You ask around, you may or may not hear from other people, because we have to protect our people. We have to protect each other. But you ask around and simply ask, not for names, not for dates or times or locations, and just ask, do you know somebody who, because of something that Charlie Kirk did or said, has decided to flee the state they live in or flee the country? And you don't be a bit surprised if you find out the answer is, yeah, I know somebody who had to flee, had to run because of the things this man did. Hear me now. I've said it again and again. He didn't deserve to lose his life for it. No. But what is the tragedy? That an innocent man lost his life? That a person lost their life. He doesn't have to be innocent because Charlie Kirk was not innocent. He was an asshole. That doesn't mean he deserved to lose his life. That doesn't mean that his children deserve to grow up without their father. That's true. That's true. Charlie Kirk, even if it had nothing to do with his family, even if he was childless, even if he was still single and bitching about how he can't get a date on Tinder because Tinder kicked him off for the third time or whatever. I'm not saying that happened. I'm just saying, even if he were that guy, and we all know that guy, still, it's a tragedy. We don't have to make him out like he was innocent. And you certainly don't have to be passing around memes and images and posts of comparing him to JFK. What? To Abraham Lincoln. Excuse me? And perhaps more offensive to me than anything else, comparing him to Dr. King, to Martin Luther King Jr. Are you kidding me? Take it back. You take that shit back. Charlie Kirk said that it was a mistake to pass the Civil Rights Act. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. We all get a little hot under the collar. We all get a little bit worked up. But I would put to you three things, okay? I made a joke about we should all be able to publicly air our grievances, but do it like a Regency gentleman. Here's the true steps. I put a lot of thought into this in the last few days. Why it is that I don't post more about this. First of all, before I get into them, first of all, it's a little bit disgusting how many conservative, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people's politics here. I'm just saying people who are socially conservative, people who want to preach about what it means to be a true Christian, whether or not it is, people who are atheists can be considered real Americans, that kind of content. Okay. To go out and capitalize and monetize the loss of life of this person and the loss of freedom of his attacker, who, let's hope they got the right guy. Let's hope. And let's hope he comes to justice over it. But then because all this elevated talk about how we're going to start, how now this is the last act of violence to end all violence, that's just going to kick off a whole war, a whole second civil war in the United States. Let's scale this back for a second, okay? This could happen. I guarantee you it won't look anything like the Civil War that we all know, that you should know is still, apart, I think now officially, from Afghanistan. The bloodiest war that America has ever fought. And certainly the one that we lost more lives in than any other war we have fought, because we lost people on both sides. But I guarantee you it won't be the same old people who go out and say, I have to have my AR-15 and it has to be the most powerful and it has to be the most, complex, and it has to be the most efficient because I'm preparing for the government's raid against us. I'm sorry. You're going to sit there and wait with your AR-15 for a Predator drone to come looking for you. Is that it? Good luck. Good luck to you on that. I'm staying out of it. no AR-15 here. No, thank you. I'm just sitting here making videos on the internet. I'm good. Don't be. I mean, you go out there, it's strange how much confidence this anti-government talk gets a person when their guy is in power and they're certain he is not going to wield it for evil. Sure, yeah, that never happens. But even if you get what you want, let's say they get their raiding parties together. I'm going to get to these three things. I just can't want to keep mentioning some things as they come up to me here. This is a little bit raw. They say that after the Civil War was one of the greatest periods of reactivism in religious activism in the history of the country. It's the same thing with after the War of 1812. You have the Second Great Awakening. Mormonism came out of that. Jehovah's Witnesses came out of that. Seventh-day Adventism came out of the aftermath of the War of 1812. There was a religious and spiritual revival came out of the Revolutionary War at the end of the Revolutionary War. Why? Because after a war, same thing with World War II, by the way. After a war, people coming back from the war, people who saw what happened at war, and especially after the Civil War, people looked around themselves and said, what the hell have we done? What was it for? What was remarkable about the Civil War after it was over was how stupidly dissatisfying it was. Remember what I said earlier about, if you're going to challenge someone to a duel, you would say, I demand satisfaction. There was no satisfaction. At the end of the war, they say, I'm not sure that this is true. I read that this was maybe true, maybe not true, that President Lincoln, at the speech where he announced that that the war was over, stood up and asked the band to play his favorite song for him. You know what that song was? It was Dixie. He had them sing Dixieland. It was so disappointing because nobody had to die for this. And we killed more of each other than at any other point in our history. And even after America, went to war with the rest of the world, there was no single conflict where we lost as many lives. And what was it for? What did it get us? This is the stupid thing about violence. There are moments where it's called for. I'm not going to say there isn't. Political violence? I don't think so. Because that is to say, violence motivated by politics. As what? Some kind of low-grade terrorism? What does it get? What does it accomplish? What does it actually do? Who changes their mind? Nobody. It's stupid. It's not just that it's tragic. It should be enough to not do it that it's tragic. Because of the lives lost, because the opportunities for people to change and grow and become better people are lost, because people lose family members, because people dig in and draw lines. That should be enough to say, yeah, not worth it. But it's stupid because nobody changes their mind. And suddenly the rhetoric ramps up to a place of violence. But it's like, oh, let's let all these people who have nothing to do with the conflict, except they've been looking for a chance to go out and commit acts of violence. And then they look at themselves and say, oh, the Reichstag fire, therefore we have to. Only to come out of it after all said and done and look around at each other and say, what did we done? What did we do? Where's the satisfaction? I wanted it to feel satisfying. And now the only people who feel satisfied are the ones who can look back and say, look what they did to these people. We had to go in and stop them so we could win the war. And once we won the war, then we can get what we wanted, the change we wanted. Could slavery have been abolished without a war? I'm confident it could have. Why did it take a war? Because somebody decided to get violent. because a lot of somebody's decided they had to get violent first. And it didn't have to happen that way. Could have sat down and let cooler heads prevail. So I have to ask, there are three things before we do anything, even just talk, even just talk. I have on frequent occasion in this last week asked myself these three questions. One, will it make anything better? Two, what am I prepared to risk? And three, what if being patient were more effective? There's a point at which I said, I'm going to make a post on TikTok, and maybe I'll even take it to the church's account on YouTube and say, it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if the person who pulled the trigger here in Utah this week was a Republican. I'm not saying it will be. I'm just saying it wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if it were. How has it turned out? We still don't know, but would have been a solid bet that at least somebody would have said, yeah, he was right. I did make a post, which I've already taken down on TikTok, saying it won't surprise me if within a few hours of now, somebody tries to pin this on trans people to make them feel more afraid, to stoke up more ire against them. And then look what happened. We've seen this play out before. It becomes a scapegoat situation. It becomes an opportunity to take somebody you already strongly dislike and commit acts of violence against them. And so we have to ask ourselves, what if I were to just, instead of posting that or instead of saying that, what if I were to just wait? Yes, it would. I could have been one of the first people to talk about it. Maybe I'd get a few more followers. Maybe I'd look like I would look a little more prophetic. No thanks. I'm good. I'm good. Because at the end of the day, even if you're right, it doesn't mean it needs to be said. Sometimes it's not my place to say. I struggle mightily with just not saying anything. I'll tell you another one. I used to get on TikTok live a lot and debate with people on TikTok. One day I got into a TikTok live with a group of Black conservatives. And I'll say this, I was not wrong. And there were a lot of people in the comments watching it who agreed with me. There were people I showed that live to, some recordings of that live to, that I have since deleted, who agreed, yeah, no, you weren't wrong. But I sure got called out for being the wrong guy to say what I said, because I'm not Black. But I had to, I said, these guys aren't allowing anybody who was Black into their conversation unless they would first come forward and state how much they agreed with these very vile racist opinions. And otherwise, you had to be opposition. I mean, you had to be not Black, basically. And I was one of the few they allowed up into the live. And I called it out. I'm like, look, internalized racism is as disgusting as racism is. In fact, I would argue it's perhaps even a little bit worse. And I mentioned it to a partner of mine. This was in a much more toxic time in my life. To my partner who said to me, oh, Joe, don't do that. Why? I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong. How was I wrong? And they said, it's not that you're wrong. It's not your place to say. I was like, well, they weren't allowing Black people up there. And I said, and there was no reason why your voice was going to change anything in that conversation. I said, no. And they said, And there was no reason why you had to say something there and then. No. I said, but you felt good because you were right and they were wrong. Yeah, that's me. I'm toxic. Toxic atheist, bro. This is what I do. I like to get into somebody's face, show off how right I am, how wrong they are, how smart I look, and how stupid they look. And everybody see. Do you see that? Do you see that? And what was the outcome? I looked like a smart bully, made other people feel stupid, and accused people of being racist, who I'm convinced were racist. And did it pay any bills of mine? No, I guarantee you it did not. Did it build the movement for me? I guarantee you it did not. Did it change hearts and minds in that room? It did not. What was it then? A waste of time. And now suddenly I said, if I'd have looked at that, laughed at it, and said, that is stupid. That is dumb. Look at the things they're saying about people who look like them, come from their same heritage, while people are in their comments saying, let me up, let me talk to you, because you need a little bit of education on the things you're talking about, because you're saying the wrong things. You're saying things that are factually incorrect. You're saying things that are hurting our community, that are hurting our people. They wouldn't let those people up. They'd block them and kick them out. We're only looking for opposition, meaning they were only looking for white people to argue with. They're only looking for white liberals to argue with. And I stupidly stepped into it and said, look how smart I am. Snap. Stepped right into that bear trap. Stupid. And once again, not surprisingly, Winter was right and I was wrong. But I so desperately wanted to just be right in a space where everybody else was wrong. And it was dumb. And that's when I looked around and said, what could I have done with my time that was more effective? What could I have done out of a place of love for the people who were hurt? And it was then that I really started to listen. In a time when my TikTok account, the one I can't get into anymore, started really to get more followers and get more people, and I started to blow up because of the things I had to say, mainly about Tim Ballard and Operation Underground Railroad and the Hillsdale controversy, etc. And I was feeling great about myself because people were listening to me talk, and you know how I love that. But then I said, well, what could I have done? What could I have done better? I can't speak for Black people. If I can't speak for them, but none of them are allowed to speak in this space, what can I do? And this partner told me, you could pass the mic. You know this already. We talked about it with you, with your standing up to speak for women. Okay. Yeah. Not speak against women, but speak for women. Yeah, okay. When you could let a woman speak for herself. Yeah. I'd have to find a woman who wanted to do that and needed a platform to do it. There you go. That's the job. You're so focused on being important. And within a matter of months, I started the Church of Korihor. The second or third sermon I gave was delivered, or that we had here at the Church of Korihor, was delivered by a woman. Then another one delivered by a woman. Then another one by a woman. And more than once by trans women. People of color. And I want to get more. We're organizing more. Because one of the most important things I learned about learning to hold my tongue and be patient and say, not everything needs my voice, is that when you actually stop and pass the mic to somebody different from you in some way, not only do you give respect to that person and their voice and a platform to their voice, you learn very important things that you had assumed you knew because you had privilege. And, in the world, and now I look back and I see what's happening in the social commentary being engaged in by people who are different from me, but not that different. People who are still Mormon, people who are still Christian, people who are still conservative, which I once was. And look at what they're saying and realize these people can't pass the mic. They can't pass the mic because they're too self-important. Oh my God, I was just like that. Not that long ago. And they don't listen. They don't understand what's been said, what needs to be said. You think you know. This last week, on a video very few people have seen so far. It was a few dozen of us so far. But and of course I won't take it down. I had this conversation with a man from New Jersey. His name is Kyle, and he is a TikToker, and he's really popular on TikToker. He's an ex-pastor, a black man who's an ex-pastor. And I had asked him, I said, and I thought, man, I got a home run. I got a slam dunk of a question here to ask him about. And I said, what about Mandisa Thomas? And he's like, I don't know who that is. I said, okay, fine. Mandisa Thomas is a woman I passed the mic to here on the Church of Korihor on a Wednesday service. And I said, tell us a little bit about what it's like to be. She's the founder of Black Non-Believers. And I said, I told her, I said, I see these people telling you that by being an atheist and speaking out as a black woman who's an atheist, that you are fighting against black people. And I said, here you are, you're a black man who is an ex-pastor. Is that what it's like? Fully anticipating that this guy was going to tell me, oh yeah, I get this all the time. And then go off in this. And you know what he said? He said, no. He said, no, I don't. Oh, okay. All right. Here I was so confident that I had a slam dunk of a question. And he said, I bet you anything, though, it's because she's a woman. And I said, wait a minute. What are you saying here? And he said, I don't hear that from people. He said, because in the community I come from, the Christian community I come from, it's not the way you talk to a man. That's not the exact words he used. You can go watch it. But that's what he left me to understand. I said, no, that's curious, because I saw an engagement between another TikToker, a black woman who's an atheist, who was called out in her comments by a black man who told her, you are disrespecting me when you say things against Christianity. You are disrespecting me. And she called it out. That, again, this is things she didn't have to say anything about. She could have just saw that comment, laughed at it, and moved on. She didn't. She stopped and she made a video about it. And she very politely responded, that's not true. I don't owe you any respect. She said, I don't pay you respect as a Christian man, because I don't find that a respectable thing. Fair enough. She said, but I am paying you respect as a black man. And I thought that's interesting, because there is a culture that if you aren't black, and especially if you aren't a black woman, we probably don't understand. We don't see their perspective. And it does seem to me like, just as an observer who's listening, that I hear these women saying, I'm sick and tired of the way they talk about the men in our community, the men from of our extraction, of our ethnicity. And they want black men to know they are deserving of respect, that they deserve to have their opinion elevated. And so here you have these women who stand up for men in their community, but want them to know there's limits. I'll stand up for you to have a right to have your voice heard and to be respected and have your voice respected. But if you want me to respect the things you're going to say, well, then you're going to have to say something I respect. And just saying, oh, all atheists who are black are fighting against black people, that's not true, she says. And this guy, Kyle, he pointed out to me and reaffirmed, yeah, he's like, I don't get that. And he pointed out his privilege and mine. We're men. So men who think, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to say something about this. They don't challenge us. But a woman gets up and says the exact same thing, you better believe they're going to hit that comment. They're going to get into the middle of that, because in the Christian community, women aren't supposed to have a voice. And I understood that better because I sat there while he talked and I listened. We could listen to each other. Now, all of a sudden, instead of getting up in somebody else's community and blabbing my mouth with my opinions, which you know I love to do, I mean, look where we are, and with my feelings, I stopped. I created more opportunities to stop and listen to other people's experience and say, okay, wait a minute. Let's take a step back here. What did I miss? What am I learning here? And grow as a person. And let me tell you, getting into that guy's TikTok live and mouthing off to him and accusing him of internalized racism, not Kyle, this other guy from a couple years ago. It was back during the big COV. It felt good in the moment because I knew I was right, they were wrong, and that other people saw me do it. And then it immediately fizzled out when I realized, and no one cared. It's like shouting into the wind, or worse. And now I have conversations with people of color. I'll go back and watch them and rewatch them. I had one of the most satisfying things in my life recently since I started the Church of Korihor. Some of you will know that I did an interview with a man I highly, highly regard named Dr. Anton Troyer from Bemidji State University, who is an Ojibwe man who, by the way, is not officially recognized because of blood quantum rules in Ojibwe culture and according to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, as being actually Ojibwe, even though his mother is Ojibwe, because his father is an Austrian Jew who survived the Holocaust, by the way. He's not considered actually Ojibwe. And he'll, I don't have to tell his story. You can go and look him up. Look up Anton Troyer. That's Treuer. Fascinating man. Fascinating. And I started reading his books. And I had a chance to talk to him. And then a woman named Amanda, who is a historian, a Mormon historian, I won't go deeper into that, posted on the Mormon Stories community page on Facebook and tagged me in it. She and I don't think we'd ever had a conversation before that. And since then, we've had a few. And she said, I can't believe nobody is talking about how Joe Rollins just had a conversation with Anton Troyer, calling out, um, well, it was partially in context of calling out Chief Mitiga, who at the time had become this kind of savior, new Mormon savior, who some fringe Mormons, frankly, fringe Mormons, believe is basically the new prophet, like the new Joseph Smith, and that he has been called to bring in and usher in the second coming of Christ, and call all of the Mormons to regather in Missouri to usher in the second coming of Christ. And I while he's out there, and I had contacted, and of course, Chief Mitiga allegedly, and I don't have any reason to doubt, is an Ojibwe man also. I asked Anton Troyer, again, a professor, a man who has written books, a really good one I can't recommend enough, especially because the audiobook is very good, is called Everything You Wanted to Know About Indians, But Were Too Afraid to Ask. Super great. Just a really good primer for how, if you grew up with the privilege of being white or white adjacent in America, you might not realize what things are like. One of the things he says in there, and every chance he gets, because he does speaking tours, and I would love to organize an opportunity for him to come and speak to us sometime. I mean, again, remarkable person. He quotes, I wish I remember where the quote was originally from. I just say it was Dr. Troyer. He says, the Indians are frequently imagined and seldom and never seen and never understood. And I thought, he says people get this idea in their head. One of the things people may or may not know is that in many reservations in America, more than half of the people, 50% or more, is the unemployment rate. And I just thought, and that blows my mind. I mean, when the unemployment rate gets above 6%, the official unemployment rate gets above even 4%, we panic across the board in the country. We panic, okay? And here you have whole communities of people where more than half of them are unemployed. And I asked him, I said, and when I had a chance to talk to him about Chief Mitiga, I briefly went over Chief Mitiga. I'm like, let's wrap it up like this. I said, do you know of any instances in which, and I just rattled off some of the things about the Book of Mormon and any of the claims made by Chief Mitiga about indigenous people? And he said, no. And then he said a really interesting thing. He said in the Native community, and especially in Ojibwe culture, we say, he who knows should speak, and he who does not know should stay silent. This is after I'd asked him, I said, can you imagine any reason why a person who looks like you, with skin like yours, that it should be said that they were dark and loathsome, like the Book of Mormon says about Lamanites? And he said, no. And he said, and if anybody says that my color or the way I look makes me less than them in any way, scientifically, they are wrong and they shouldn't speak. I went, that's power. That's real power. And if I hadn't learned how to pass the mic, how to say, go in there with a plan for what you're going to say. But then when you hear something other than what you expect to hear, instead of challenging it and just saying, well, I was thinking you were going to say, stop and listen to what was actually said and update. And now I feel every time I think of that interview, I feel more satisfied about that than about most things I've done with my life. That satisfaction. We can pass the mic and feel satisfied. We can listen and be satisfied. So I would put to you, here's 3 steps we could all be doing a little bit better. 1, before you do anything, ask, will it make anything better? 2, what are you prepared to risk? And 3, what if just being patient were more effective? It's hard because one of the most dangerous things, sorry, tried to remove that. One of the most dangerous things I think we're seeing in our society right now is that everything warrants a response from everybody all the time. And then we get so overwhelmed that emotionally we start to shut down and we start to feel less. And that's bad because the less we feel is the more attuned we become to hate, to looking to each other and saying, look at you. You look like the person who would blah, 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 blah. And you might think to yourself, yeah, don't say I'm hateful. I'm not the person. Just because I look at that person and say, look at their tattoos, look at their face, look at their, this or that. Look at this attribute. They fit the profile of the person. Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, maybe that's even true. I saw it again with people who are, what do you want to say? Liberal, left of center, whatever. Who are people more like me. Getting onto TikTok of these people who were calling for violence and organizing that they're going to start training. They want to start training with all of their local friendly, people who are like-minded is the new way of saying, other racists. Sorry. They say people who are like-minded, and we're going to start training. And then I looked at it and go, oh, really? You're going to start? Okay. And like a lot of these commenters, I had a snarky little thing that I said to say about the way the person posting the video looks, and like hold my tongue and say, Joe, A, look at yourself. B, is that making it better? Is this making anything better? What am I prepared to risk for this comment? What if one of my children were to find that comment? What if my father were to find that, or my mother? What if my employer were to see that I had said that? You know what? And what if I were just to be patient and just observe it? Just let it go. It's like, oh, look at that. There it goes. Look at that. Doesn't need me to engage with it. It's there. I saw it. Did you see it? Okay. Moving on. Instead, and then I open up the comments because I'm like, I do want to know why this person has thousands of comments on this video. I don't get thousands of comments on my videos. I post good ones. And it was like comment after comment about, oh, really? Are you, I'm not even going to repeat some of them. They all had to do with the person's weight, the person posting it. And some of them were really funny. I'm such a toxic asshole sometimes. But some of them were really funny. It was really funny. But as a fat man, I couldn't help but look at them and go, okay, that's true about me too. So, I mean, don't. Well, I'm going to have a good chuckle about it. I'm going to laugh about it. Was that really necessary? Because, okay, what speaks better than to let that person, who obviously is not you know, boot camp fit, talking about we're going to start training. We're going to get ready for the big Civil War, is making fun of them in their comment section or making videos about them anywhere near as effective as just letting them do what they're doing. Just let them do it. Let them do it. Let them sit there with it. Let other people sit and observe. And just be patient. Just pass the mic to that. Say, oh yeah, look at this. Say again. You're on camera. You're on film right now. Go ahead. Say that. What? And I think that part of the reason why we feel like we have to respond is because there is a very real primal need inside each of us to protect ourselves and protect people that we love. And to say, I'm calling you out on this before you go and do something that's going to get somebody I love hurt. And that's a very real, that's a very genuine emotion. That's a very authentic emotion. That's a love-driven emotion. That is a recognizable and respectable feeling. And it's unfortunately true that until they actually escalate to violence, there's just nothing you can do to stop them. And calling them out and saying you are this or that, insert sundry insult, even if it is clever and even if it is funny or even if it is totally true, is not making it better. Even if you are right, it doesn't mean you have to engage. It's not worth your time. If it's not worth your time, don't bother with it. But more importantly, if it's not worth the desensitizing, if it's not worth it, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this comment in the last few days, and it just terrifies me. And this is more reason why I've been more silent about this than I would have liked to be. Believe you me, I got lots of opinions about what's happening right now. And my drafts folder is disgusting. Blah, 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 and then this, and let me tell you this, and let me tell you that. I'm going to tell you this. Reminds me of The Meaning of Life, Monty Python's Meaning of Life, because, there's a scene where everyone eats the salmon pudding, which I didn't even know was a thing, at this dinner party, and death comes to the door and comes for all of them and takes them off into the nether region, off into the afterlife. And one of the American couples at the party stopped to argue with death about now see here, you've been quite rude enough, entered into our dinner party, and rather uninvited, I might say. And let me tell you, I just wanted to say, and then death turns to them and says, you Americans are always saying, let me tell you something, and let me blah, 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 blah. And so I often think of that. Anyways, but let me tell you something. I just want to say, if we engage with everything that they do and say, with something somebody else does and says, at best, even if we are right, we're making it worse. Not just because we are prompting them to become more angry and more violent, but because we start to desensitize ourselves and each other. And these are the comments I'm hearing that are the greatest cry for help I can perceive. When I step back and say, not everything needs my voice, pass the mic. I'm going to pass the mic right now, even if it's to people I disagree with. I'm going to pass the mic and let them record. Let them go on record. Let them show who they are. And just sit here and observe it for a minute, because not everything needs me to jump right in the moment and highlight, oh, this person said this. Look what they said. Look what they did. Look what they said. Look what they did. A little of that is fine, but at some point it gets to be too much. And it's this comment that I've been seeing in direct messages, that I've been seeing in posts on social media, that I've been hearing from people mouth to ear in real life saying, this week has been so hard. And people saying, I feel like we've all been through so much. And I'm just so overwhelmed. I feel so beaten down. I feel like we're in so much trouble right now. And and people expressing with their voices and with their words a need to take a break from it all because it's too much. And I think if I'm going to say something, for a while there, I thought, this Sunday at Godless sermon, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up there and say, you're allowed to be happy. Yes, this person is passed. Yes, his children are going to grow up without a father. That doesn't mean you're not allowed to be happy. You're allowed to be happy. And you can feel for them and look at their situation and say, that was unfair. That's not right. This is wrong. And you're still allowed to be happy. You're still allowed to be okay. And if you don't, even if it's not happy, you're still allowed to be okay. You're allowed to be okay. Because if every single thing that happens and every time somebody rises up to say, let me tell you something else they're going to do. Let me tell you something else that's happening. Let me tell you something else he said. Let me tell you something about this. And we all have opinions. The problem is now we are so interconnected in our regular lives. We have access to each other through our devices and through our frequent meeting places in the world, whether that's online or in person. With so much access to each other that we can start to make each other overwhelmed to the point where we can't feel. And even if our feelings are vindicated, even if they're justified and righteous, the fact that we have closed ourselves down from being able to feel is part and parcel the reason why we've gotten to the place where everybody has become radicalized against each other. So being right is fine. Being right is good. I posted, and this was up until last night, I was going to do a sermon on brain drain in NASA. This is so disturbing. Yesterday, there was a post from an event, as I understand it. There's an event that NASA held commemorating or celebrating people who agreed to quit NASA so that the upcoming budget cuts wouldn't affect operations as much. So they're basically leaving to take their salary off the books because the government has decided to cut their budget in half, to cut NASA's budget in half. At the same time that they're... Never mind. And a woman wore in the picture, knowing she was going to be photographed with all of these nerds, wore a t-shirt she'd had made that said, laid off with honor. And then it had a picture of a broken heart with the NASA logo on it. So that it would go on record and people would see. This woman who is a scientist, a biologist who works for NASA, would record for history, for everyone. This was a dream job for people who love science. But because we exist in a time when science has become unpopular, now we have to go look for jobs somewhere else because NASA is no longer a place where science is welcome. where people who love science can have a future and a career. And I thought, does anybody see the brain drain? This is the same thing that happened. I don't know if you remember, right after, and maybe I haven't done enough research into this, maybe nobody knows, so we can't say for sure. Right after the invasion of Ukraine began, and Vladimir Putin started to draft young men into the army to go fight in Ukraine, they had what was called the brain drain, the Russian brain drain, where young people who have education started to flee Russia so that they wouldn't get sent to fight in Ukraine. And within not very long from then, Russia started to launch rockets into space that got lost on their way. They sent a rocket to the moon and it got lost. The people who know how to run telemetry in Russia, they fled the country so they didn't have to go fight and die in Ukraine. This is where we are. And you look at this and say, because people are hateful about science, anybody who knows science, anybody who does science for the government, they want them to lose their jobs. Well, then, so why are people losing their jobs? If that's how that works, you just hate people, so you want them to lose their jobs. Okay, then why are people losing their jobs over shit they post on their private social media, their personal social media, about what happened with Charlie Kirk? What's driving that hate? And rather than posting it, rather than getting alarmed about it, what if we could just take a step back and say, okay, what if we were just patient? And it's hard if you're the one who loses their job. And it's hard if you're the one who loses family members. Another post I've seen frequently on TikTok or on Facebook of people posting the voicemails they're getting from relatives, screaming, Christian relatives, screaming and swearing at them for being part of the woke mind virus, being part of the woke this or that, and screaming about them while they just sit there and look at the camera and hold up the phone and play the voicemail. And it is disturbing. Well, they just sit there and say, look, as if to say, all I'm doing is existing, and this is what I'm getting from this. I'm not saying that you shouldn't say anything. I'm not saying nobody should do anything. I'm just saying we all need to take a step back and just look at it and say, let them speak. Let them say it. Let them go on record saying it. And before you respond, I'm not saying don't respond. I'm not saying that. I've been doing responding too. All I'm saying is, before you respond, think to yourself, will it change anything? What am I willing to risk? Let me just say it the way that I wrote it down. And what if being patient were more effective? Because time is going to tell. The most useful thing, and I'll end it with this, the most useful thing I've learned out of this experience, watching America descend into fascism, and that's exactly what's happening, is why resistance is almost always without a voice. I'm going to mention this real quickly, okay? There was an organization, I'm trying to remember the exact name of it. It was called the OOS or the OSS. I think OSS. Basically, it was a sabotage training organization during World War II. And there was a guy, I saw this really interesting thing. A guy actually took the manuals that are public domain, that are, people can get, on how to sabotage, um, on how to commit acts of sabotage, and wrote a whole book about corporate sabotage and how organizations can implement the things that they said. Basically the things that the U.S. government did to try and accelerate the end of the war by distributing materials in various languages behind enemy lines on how you, regular, ordinary person, can do something to help us end the war faster. Do you want the war to be over faster? Do you want less people to lose their lives? Great. Be on our side. Work with us and not against us. Here's some things that you can do. One of the stuff, I forget what it's called. It's called Gambin, something like that. Basically, they would take crushed walnut shells and aluminum filings and iron filings, I believe, and they would they would distribute them in condoms, in little film canisters, aluminum film canisters, and then they were wrapped up in the latex sleeve. They had extra condoms, so they just stuffed it into condoms, wrapped them around twice, and put them inside these aluminum film canisters. And then they would drop them behind enemy lines. And they would tell people, you go up to anything that has a motor on it, open up the oil on it, take out this thing, and be careful because it'll be dangerous, because you can be rest assured somebody's should be standing guard there. You take any piece of equipment, an airplane, a tank, a truck, anything that has an engine on it, open up its oil, what am I thinking of? Oil intake, and take this shit and dump it in there. Cap it back up and get out of there. And still today, some people take crushed walnut shells and use it actually to clean an engine. But once that those walnut shells, the theory went, once those walnut shells had cleared out all of the gunk inside the engine as it would circulate around, the metal filings would start to scratch and corrode the metal inside the entire engine until the entire engine was completely ruined, and the engine would have to be entirely replaced. These were the things that they trained people how to do. There was a really fascinating thing they did. You can watch YouTube, and there it's on YouTube, where they show you in the most hilarious of ways, the ways with that old-fashioned 1940s voice. Here's some wonderful ways that you can learn how to derail a train, and they go over, let's watch what you can do. And it was basically an ode to how amazing the engineering of train wheel sets are. I forget the name of what they call them, like carriages are. The wheel carriages, they're remarkably well designed to take, if there's a big hole in the track, they can just roll it right over it. A big train will just roll right over it. And they show their footage where they actually demonstrate how to do it. And basically, I'll save you if you don't want to know. If you're curious, I'll save you watching the whole thing. Basically, it was, don't just take out a piece of a track. Take out two pieces of two tracks on either side, but separate them out by enough distance to where an entire wheel carriage will bob down into one, causing the whole train to tilt one direction, and then run over on the other end. It would a whole wheel carriage could bob into the other one, so that the train, basically, so that each car from the locomotive to the caboose, or as far back as you can go, each car in the train would tilt this direction and then tilt that direction. And as each car went boom, 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 sure enough, you could derail a train. And basically, they would take these training materials and they would send films behind enemy lines. They would send radio broadcasts by shortwave radio They would do everything they could to get to people behind enemy lines to say, here are good ways to help us accelerate the end of the war by just getting into a position where you can cause damage and just shut down the war machine from inside. Now, of course, I don't think it was strongly held in the mind of anybody at that time, who at the time everybody was just concerned about ending the war. I don't think that it ever occurred to anybody that with transparency laws, they were training saboteurs for everywhere and forever. That I think they didn't realize at the time. You can go on YouTube and you can watch them. You can watch how to do this. You can go on eBay and buy manuals. You can go. You can just type it in. A lot of this same material that was used to train saboteurs during World War II became what was known later as the Anarchist Cookbook. You remember that back in the 90s? Those of you who were alive in the 90s, the Anarchist Cookbook, that came from this. I mean, they just took these field manuals and the Army's field manuals and said, look, if you can get a hold of this, and this, and this, you can make an altimeter. You can make something that will, you can make a device that won't activate until an airplane that it's in such and such, it gets up to such and such altitude. And now the whole world can have it because the government's not allowed to keep those things secret for longer than 20 years or something, 40 years. And so now the whole world has it. It's like, oh shit, we didn't think that one through all the way. All right. Because at the time it was just about ending the war. But one of the interesting things, this guy actually wrote a book. I wish I could remember the book or the guy now, but I remember listening to this guy and just laughing about it. Where he basically was talking about inefficiency in the workplace and in organizations, and he said basically human beings start sabotaging their own organizations without even realizing that that's what they're doing. And one of the manuals that was very useful to the Allies in helping to put an end to the Axis war machine was to train people that what you should do is get up in a public space at your work. If your work has anything to do with moving food, moving supplies, any kind of transportation, or if your organization has anything to do with information, whether that's in the print media or radio or anything like that, here's a great way to subvert the war machine and to sabotage from the inside. And it said, get to a point somewhere where you can make a big speech and thread into that speech enough group speak to be able to, so that anybody listening would think you're talking in favor of the regime, in favor of the group, and get up there and make long-winded speeches about how we all ought to be doing this and we all ought to be doing that. And aren't we all so lucky? And it actually says to interlace as you're speaking little tangents about how grateful you are to be a part of this great effort and what a timely moment it is. Just make a great big speech about it, because if you're speaking on behalf of the regime isn't going to stop and tell you to shut up. Nobody's going to tell you to stop. And so it became a saboteur's strategy to talk too much about the regime, when an easier thing to do would be to simply let them do it. Here's the other side of that same thing for me now, is that if you talk too much about anything, you run a serious risk of exposing too much. And this I have to remind myself of because, as you can see, I like to run on for a while. I'm actually about to finish this in under 2 hours, so this is a bit of a record for me lately. But sometimes the simplest act of sabotage to somebody else is to remember what Sun Tzu said, and every major strategist that I know of, that I can think of off the top of my head, whether it's Napoleon or George Patton, who else? Caesar. All of the, throughout history, this comes up again. I believe Alexander the Great, there are examples of this, would say or practice this very important thing. When your enemy is in the middle of making a mistake, don't interrupt him. If they're in the middle of showing who they are, let them do it. And it's harder when you lose your job. Anybody out there who apparently people are losing their jobs because now it's being organized to go out and dox people so that they will lose their jobs and contact their employers. It's gotten to a point now where I'm not going to say how this has touched me personally, but in my life, I've seen it too. And these are, I'm not saying that anybody's going to cost me my jobs or clients, but I can tell somebody has tried. And I hear it. I'm like, really? Okay, so what happens now? And so far, doesn't look like anything. But that's because I don't work at a university or a school, where apparently some people are being fired for having the wrong opinion about a monster like Charlie Kirk, who is not a saint, no matter the fact that now he's actually being literally painted by Mormons as if he is a Latter-day Saint. Less than 24 hours. There were pictures of him standing there with Jesus wearing an all-white suit posted by Mormons because obviously Charlie Kirk is Mormon now. What? I saw a picture just yesterday of him with this Irina woman who was a blonde white woman from Ukraine who was unalived, as they say, on a train. And it says Charlie calming Irina down. I said, and I, of course, sometimes I can't help myself. Posed and said, oh, good. Now Charlie Kirk is in heaven telling women to calm down. Good. No, that does fit. They have to lionize him posthumously because the things he said in life were so horrible. Shouldn't have cost him his life. It should not have cost him his life. I've said it again and again. Somebody will clip this out. Here's my prophecy for you. Somebody will clip this out of me just saying how I don't like him or how this or that, and then forget to include. And I said, that doesn't mean he should have lost his life, which was stupid. It was wrong. And it was the kind of thing that was just going to make everything worse from the beginning. That part will get clipped out. But sometimes the most important thing we can do is to take a step back, be patient, and tell ourselves, okay, this is going to hurt me somehow. This is going to hurt for now. But if I engage with it, it'll only get worse. In that moment, let them tell you who they are. Remember that advice? When someone shows you who they are, believe them, and the first time. Unfortunately, that means sometimes we do have to let them. We have to let somebody show us who they are. And don't forget it. But engaging with it could just get you into more trouble. So there may come a moment where you have to let the parasite pick at you a little bit. Just let it go. Let it hurt. At the cost of a little bit of pain now. Remind yourself, A, if you react, they'll just make it worse. And B, if you can endure for a while, let it be just for a little while. Eventually, they'll get bored with you, and the time will come when it's more effective to get a little something done quietly, even covertly. Because in a moment where tyrants reign, it is those who know how to quietly work in the system who can sometimes do the most amount of damage to the regime and cause the most change. And it's the ones who get loud who have to be more careful. Because if you are loud, you paint a target on you. I don't mind mentioning, I'm one of those people. But not because I can't control myself, because believe you me, I have. I'm doing it. But because somebody has to speak up for them, but that's not everybody. It's so important. It's not everybody. There's a line in a song that you guys know very well, The Quiet Fight. Those of you who've heard me talk about this before. It says, drink your water. This is a shirt Winter gave me. Is it awesome? It says, drink water, love hard, fight racism. I love this thing. There's a line based on this shirt, actually, that said of The Quiet Fight, that says, drink your water, move in the dark. Because at the end of the day, the most damage that you can make to a tyrant may not be speaking up. There has to be somebody speaking up. And some of you are out there and you're doing it. Sometimes somebody has to take that risk and speak up. I'm trying to do it. There are other people trying to do it. I'm not trying to discourage anybody who is prepared to accept the risks. But some people need to remember, most people in any resistance need to remember, if I lose my job, if I can't feed my family, if I lose my housing, I'm not going to be very effective. And for those people, I say, okay, not being vocal doesn't mean you're not effective. You can be effective. But remember this advice: drink your water. If you're dehydrated, you're not of any use to anyone. And move in the dark. If you can move in the dark, if you can get something done in a small way over a long extended period of time, you can do more damage. In a lot of times, I actually abandoned a few months ago, at the early outset. I was going to show some of this train footage, but then I thought, no, the time's not right. This training on how to derail a train, I thought, I remember thinking, this is the most important thing for strategy I think I've learned out of this weird rabbit hole I found myself running down into. That they say you can, hey, it's good to see you, Kim. That, you can try to derail a train, and all the ways you think that it should be easy to do, they don't work. That was the first thing they did. You think that if you cut a notch in a train track, that'll derail a train. It's not true. You think if you put something on the train track, that'll derail a train. It's not true. You can think that you can put something here that will, catch the train as it comes along. It's not true. The train's going to run right over it. Basically, this thing's a love story to trains. Maybe that's when my autistic brain caught onto it. But it's a love story about how amazing the engineering of trains really are, and how many people who think they understand how to derail a train. You are obviously wrong, because you don't realize all of this has been thought out. There are smarter people than you who have sat down and figured out how to keep a train on the tracks, even if A, B, or C. And in the end, it's basically the moral of the story of this, like, what is it, 15-minute? I think it was like a 15-minute newsreel. It was this training film to train saboteurs where they said, you got to stop thinking about derailing a train as something that happens between the wheel carriages and the track. You need to start thinking of it as something that makes the height, the center of gravity of that train, tossed to one side, then immediately tossed to the other on each car progressively as it goes, because each car is designed to allow a little bit of wobble, but only a little bit between each train. If that wobble train to train gets more and more and more and more pronounced, the whole thing will tip over and you've got a derailed train. In a real way, fighting oppression is like that. You got to think strategically about how the machine works, not how destroying the machine will work, how to make the machine work against itself. It's the same reason why they distributed this, gunk to put into the oil system in the engine, is because if you can get into the oil, you get into everything in the engine. If you can cause harm to the entire engine from one system, then you can actually put an entire complicated, powerful piece of equipment out of commission. And I think there's a point in the training manual where it actually says, and remember, this is everything with an engine in it. It doesn't have to be a tank, and it doesn't have to be a train. It can be a lawnmower. It can be anything. If it causes somebody to have to put that piece of equipment aside until somebody can get out there, or a technician can get out there and fix it, that's getting the job done. If you can put somebody out of commission and say, well, I can't do anything right now because the machine's broken, that's effective. If it gets people off the line making this or that, or driving this here or there, and gets them sitting there listening to somebody drone on about even if it's for the regime, cool. The longer that they're sitting there listening to a big, long-winded speech is the less time they're out there doing their jobs. Move in the dark. It's people who made little things happen behind the scenes that toppled every dictatorship. Yeah, there comes a point maybe where, I don't even know that this is true, but there's a story that goes that says that Vladimir Putin watched in terror when Muammar Gaddafi was dragged through the streets. And most of our news networks wouldn't even cover most of it because it was so violent. Yeah, there comes a moment where that's what happens to a dictator. But for the most part, dictators have a nasty habit of dying peacefully in their beds, or of getting removed from power and finding themselves in exile for 10, 15, 20 years or what have you. It's a nasty little habit because they amass so much power while the machine just runs efficiently? Well, the funny thing is that the machine of stupidity starts to ruin itself if you give it enough time. Let them ruin their own machine. Let them break it down. There are people who will get good at it, at fixing the machine. And that is the point where where you may be in a position to say, if this train will wobble car to car, it'll tip over. And if you are out of a job, that's not going to be you. If you're not there to do it, then it may be that there's nobody there to do it. So there comes a time to look at what's happening and say, I got an opinion, I got something to do or something to say, and it matters. But now is not the time. This is not the place. And risking my livelihood is not worth it. I wish we were not in that place right now. But we obviously are. We are now in a place where you have to be careful who knows what about you. And it may mean that some people who are gay are going to have to stay in the closet if you are in the closet. It may mean that some people who are trans have to be careful about who they tell or how you live. It sucks. That sucks so much. It makes me so mad. I hate it. Of all places, America should not be the place where you have to be afraid. But it is right now. This is where we are. They're organizing posses to go out, rounding up people, and they're not saying what they're going to do with them. Be fucking careful. There's another line from the song, which I think we'll close with. Don't show your cards. Don't give it away. Remember that level 1 is stay alive. Figure something out. And we'll be here as a community. And we'll watch out for each other. We'll protect each other. And if the day comes where we can't, where they come for us, I will burn it all down to protect you, if that's what it takes. If it takes losing everything I've built, I will burn it all down. I won't let them have us. But that doesn't require violence all the time. And I have no intention of violence towards anyone. Because it doesn't work. Half the time, it doesn't work. And right now, we're seeing how it definitely is just hurting everybody. It's better to find a quiet way to subvert the regime. Do it quiet. Stay hydrated. Amen. Got some good things coming up for you in this week. Look for a new post on Wednesday for sure. Not tomorrow, but possibly Tuesday. I'm likely to post something new about my Ted Bundy story, including the long interview I did with Chris Mortensen. And I'm looking forward to, I hate to say it that way, I'm looking forward to possibly reigniting my series about Tim Ballard. Stay tuned. That could get exciting in a real hurry here.
Never forget, it's a quiet fight. In their shadow, guard the light. We are still here. Reason prevails, arm in arm.